Okay, now it's recording. So I assume you open the project. There's no Docker this time. And you'll see there are 3 files here. Actually, if you look at here, I already set up a project for you. You probably won't see this MVU folder. Don't worry, because it's coming from another branch. As you know, Git actually doesn't care about folders, so it's ignored. There's a solution file, and I need to zoom things, I presume, a bit. Appearance. 1 level zoom would be good enough. And you will see there's a SRC folder. There's a client project, which is an F# project. And there's .NET Tools, which only has Fable. And, well, we have a solution. And there is a client. Inside the client, which is the most of our work will go on, we have a package.json file here. And it has 3 dev dependencies that are, one is Node, TypeScript, and Vite. So Vite is, as you might know, it's like a counterpart of Webpack, if you're not familiar. It's become recently more popular. It requires a far less amount of configuration compared to Webpack, and it's faster. It somehow works with Fable in a good way, although I have a little bit doubts about the development speed. There's some nasty bugs still on in Vite development, but it's another story. So this is what we are going to use. If you have the folder, I think you can start with installing the dependencies by hitting npm I, which I did already. And another thing you may want to do is, well, at first, actually, we start with the no packet, but we are going to migrate to packet later. The dependencies are just like that. We're using NuGet. At first, I decided to use NuGet. However, I was quickly frustrated. Yeah. So with that, and then rest of the workshop, I just started to use Packet. We have an index.html file in the root stuff. And this is, I didn't write this file. It was taken from, I think it is a LinkedIn course. So this exercise was from a LinkedIn course. So the credit is due to them, but for the better or worse. There's a public folder, which has the styles, which I didn't care. I didn't write them either. They're a bit old and outdated, I think, but it's a little bit out of the scope. And yeah, that's it. So once you do that, you have the extensions, you should be able to see this thing. Are we all good? Yeah. So we have a very simple model, which even don't have exercise. There's no exercise here. So it's a bit for basic very starters. As I said, our first goal is to make an application that is running without using any framework, no React, no Lit, and you will see it's fairly simple. And it will actually demonstrate how Elmish works in very basic manner. So I defined, well, ideal. There's a time called list. So this will be there's a timer, and it will be a 4-element list. And each compartment of this list will denote a portion of time. So the first compartment will denote the minutes. The second compartment will denote the seconds. The third compartment will denote the milliseconds. And the last fourth compartment will denote, well, centiseconds actually, denote the entire duration in terms of centiseconds. We also have sometimes status. Well, for example, the initial status that we didn't start it, we just started when the application starts. When we successfully typed the thing correctly, when we make a mistake, and we are on the good course. So the application still goes on, but we haven't made any typo. And we have 4 messages. The tick represents whenever the timer kicks in, we will dispatch a tick message so that the timer updates. Start over is like a reset message that we want to restart. There's a key press. When you press a key from the UI, it will just issue that message. And then whenever the text is updated from UI, we will issue this message. And finally, our model is just composed of these 5 properties. The time is there, status is there. the current text represents what have we typed so far. Okay, and the target text is the text that we are trying to achieve. So this is what we are trying to type. Okay, and that's our model. Perhaps when the application runs, and you will see it will make more sense. Just talking maybe doesn't give you much clue, but any questions so far? Okay, all good. So this brings us to core. In a regular Elmish application, we usually have an init function and an update function. However, this is a little bit more simplified case. We won't even have the init as in the classical sense, but we will have an update function. So we can just look at and this is the core part of our application. And we can look at what these things do. And here, actually, we will feel it as an exercise. So this will be, I'll just help you out. The update function will take a model, and as a secondary parameter, which is a little bit counterintuitive because in Elmish, the message is the first parameter, it will take a message. And we are effectively, by using this function keyword, it's actually pattern messaging. I'm assuming everyone is familiar with function, what function is. It's like a message, match message is equal to this one. Okay, and assuming this gets a message, something like that. Okay, so these are identical. It's a personal F-sharp thing. Whenever we get a tick, we are going to update our model with the new time. It means that we want to increment the time. Okay, so that's what it does. And there's some sort of a little bit more sophisticated logic here. And what this does is, as I mentioned, the fourth compartment was the total time, and we are incrementing the total time by 1 centisecond, which gives us the newer version of T3. And then we are actually calculating the number of seconds by dividing the dividing the number of minutes by dividing the entire time by first 100 and then by 60. We find out how many minutes has passed so far, which is T0. Similarly, T1 represents the minutes. We just divide the T3 by 100 because the T3 represents the centiseconds, and then subtract the remaining part of subtract the minutes, and that just gives you the remaining seconds. And finally, the T2 is the remaining minutes. If it's confused, don't worry about it. It's some logic that arranges the T0, T1, T3 in a way. Now, I'd like you to fill this part. What would it be?
So just to confirm my understanding, this is representing it in what, like, minutes. This integer list just is like the minute value, the second value, the centisecond value, etc.
Yes. So the first part it's a four element list, and the first one is the total minutes as an integer, and that's why we floor all of them. The second compartment is which is T1, is the seconds so far. The third compartment, T3, is the centiseconds so far. And the fourth compartment is the total duration, total elapsed time in terms of centiseconds. By centiseconds, I refer to 1/100th of a second. In this case, we are going to return a list. So based on the description I have given, what would it be? Well, it will be a list.
Just a list of these values.
Yeah, and in what order? Well, it's a definition, right? It's by definition. So this is not an interesting, just to keep your attention on the problem. That's the point of the exercise. So yeah, this is the answer. And well, what we want is probably we want to convert them to integers as well. I'm not sure if it's required, but okay. So basically, whenever a tick happens, that we'll call this update time, and it will update the time. That's it. So there's a start over function, which will happen when when we reset everything? What will it be? What do you think? If I were to give you a hint, we're going to modify the model. And perhaps one of the things we are going to do is setting the status to initial. But that's not yet. That's not all yet. Any other ideas? What could be the time when we start over?
Well, 0.
Yeah.
And you also need to clean a text that was populated so far.
Exactly. So this is how we change the state of whenever this message comes, it updates the state. So we are actually, this is how Elmish works. Whenever we keep ref, this is something it's like to prevent a hack so that the user doesn't keep a button and then type something. And if the status is initial, we just move to just start a state, and that's what it does. If it is confusing, don't mind, it's not super important. What is important is this part. So whenever the text is updated, what we want is we want to compare the text that is defined so far, that is written so far against the actual text. First, we set that, well, the current text will be updated, right? With the text that's incoming. The second part is we would like to know how much of portion, let's say you have typed 5 characters, okay? We want to get 5 characters from the target text so that we can do a comparison, okay? I mean, there are multiple ways to do it, so but I just follow this logic. So if you type 6 characters, we are going to grab the 6 characters from target text. And the next thing is that we are going to compare if our current text is equal to the target text. So what's going to happen here? What do you think?
End of the exercise.
Yeah, we can say that. Now that's complete in my own definition. But this is about it means that we have typed everything correctly, entire text. This case represents we haven't done yet, but we are on a good track. There's no typo because we are matching the equal number of letters. What do you think it will be? If we can cheat here, we can look at the status here, complete, wrong, correct. What would it be?
Was it maybe just started? No.
It means we have typed something, and let's say we have typed 1 or 2 letters, and that 1 or 2 letters is correct so far. Why it is? Because it's equal to the origin text match, and origin text match is the target text substring. Any ideas? Well, in my own definition, let's look at the states here. We have the complete, we have the wrong, we have the correct. So in this case, it's correct.
Yeah.
And the other case is just, what will it be?
Wrong.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, our application is logically completed. That's all. It's so far we haven't used any framework, any libraries, but this is the core part of the logic. There's nothing else. What we need is to write the UI part now in terms of plain JavaScript. And that's where the app file comes in. So we switch to that file. Let's build the things just to see if everything compiles so far. So at first, so we open these namespaces. There's a browser DOM browser type which allows us to use Fable directly to access to the elements. So you can see that document query selector use this thing and we cast to the HTML element. Where does this come from? Let's look at the index.html file. So there's you can see there's a test area, there's an origin text here, there's a test wrapper here. Don't ask why things are named this way. There's a timer here, there's a reset button here, and basically it's all there. Okay. And so basically this one is just getting the test wrapper, which is the wrapper over our text area that we type. Okay. This one gets the actual test area. So this is an text area element, as you can see from what we cast. This one is the origin text. It means, well, we are getting this part. This is the targeting. This is what we are trying to type. And, well, this is the reset button. And this is the timer. What will it be? If you look at here, timers here.
Initially, you send it to 0.
But we are trying to grab the element. Right now, our objective is to get a reference to the element, just like these cases. So it will be like a document.
Yeah, based on the index.html, you grab the timer class.
Yeah, correct. Query selector. There's a query selector and query selector all. Query selector all will return an array, and there's one that's returned the first one. What will it be? We still compile a compilation error because the left-hand side asks an HTML element. So what should we do?
Cast it.
Yeah. Cast to what?
HTML element.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's all. Yeah. So far, so good. Now, I told you in every Elmish program, we have an initialization part. But in this case, we are going to do a little manual. And this one just initialize the model. So this is what's the initial state of our model. And it's initially it's initial. The current text is empty string. The target text is coming from the origin text. Remember this one? And it extracts the P also, notice. And the time. Well, we have done this. What will it be? What will be the initial state of time?
Zero.
Yeah, all zeros. Notice our convention, we decided that, at least I decided, which is you can come here with your own convention. I decided that time should be a 4-compartment list. Okay, cool. So that's how we initialize our model. There's a function called view time, which we will visit a bit later. Stop timer, we're going to visit a bit later. I think we can start from here. Now, this is the most important part of this entire, at least this Elmish introduction. So somehow magically, Fable, even though it's not a .NET platform, is able to run mailbox processors in JavaScript platform. It runs well. There are some sort of limitations. It's not super one-to-one perfect approach. And that, I mean, in the sense of doesn't support all features of mailbox processor, but it supports a good enough portion of it, which is very useful. So because we are trying to develop a functional application, we don't want to mutate states. We don't want to use mutable variables. And what we're going to use is a mailbox processor. And typically a mailbox processor has a loop that is recursive. And what we do is we define our mailbox processor, we start, and this inbox is something we can wait for the message. You can imagine it's like a task or promise kind of thing. Typically, the default usage of mailbox processor is you define a recursive function. In this case, I call it message loop. And the first parameter you pass it's the initial state. The state, actually, not the initial one, but what's the state? We want to keep it. Once you do that, you call this with the initial state. By default, when this application runs, you have defined our model as the initial state. And this model will come here and will come to here. We'll wait for it. So we need, at this point, we want to read a message and we want to wait until someone sends a message. What will it be? For this to, in order to do this, you need to know about a bit of mailbox processors. Any ideas? Let me give you a hint. Any guesses? The answer is visible on the screen. One of these.
Is it receive maybe?
Yes, it's received.
You want to pop up first one from the queue.
Yes. Eventually, this, as you said, this works like a queue. If someone sends, if this multiple messages somehow comes, well, which is not possible. And the reason it's not possible because this code runs on JavaScript UI, which is already single-threaded. But technically, it could have been if it were a multi-thread environment, maybe there's a worker or something kind of thing. Then yes, it would have worked this way. It would have taken from queue as well. So the real queue would be the event loop of JavaScript, that is the actual event loop. So we get the message. What is that message? The message is this one. Remember, we define it here. Tick, start over, key press, one of these four. So once we receive a message, what we want to do, remember we have written our update function to handle this message. The update function is a special function that takes a model and a message and returns a newer version of model without mutation, similar to what you guys do in React, right? You don't mutate the state in React directly, and that's why we are passing the model and the message. In real Elmish, this is flipped, but anyway, and we get a newer version of model. Shall I repeat? So basically, what we do is once this mailbox process started, we get this inbox. And we define typically a recursive function. And the parameter of this recursive function represents the current model, current state. And inside our thing block, we just call this thing, let bang inbox receive, which will listen someone to dispatch a message to this thing. And once the message comes, it will send this message along with the current model to the update function. And we'll get a newer version of the model, which I call new model. Once we get the new model, what are we going to do? We're going to render it. That's it. So we call this view function, passing the model and the dispatcher. What is dispatcher? Dispatcher is this thing. And it's a function that allows you to post things into here. Okay? That allows you to post things into here. So we'll see how it's going to use. And once the view is rendered, what we're going to do is we're going to recurse with the newer version of the model. So that the model will be the newer version of the model. And this loop will run indefinitely, forever. This is our own event loop. And this actually, Elmish version 2 was doing this essentially. It's doing the same thing. In Elmish version 3 and 4, they just moved it to some sort of ring buffer kind of thing for, I don't know, for performance or stability reasons. But if you look at the Elmish source code in version 2 branch, you will see a message loop, a mailbox processor. Cool. Any questions? Anything?
So you are essentially simulating what happens technically inside of the Elmish, but you're still not using Elmish.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And
as I said, with a subtle difference, it's Elmish. It's more like Elmish version 2. But yes.
And what is this line 58? What are you preventing with this?
I just can't recall. I suppose. Well, we can see it, right? Wait, sorry. Okay, it prevents this one. It says that, well, are you sure this is initialized? It's a good question. It's actually warning me. And I'm sure, because we are going to wait here. So it suppresses that one. So F# compiler warns us for something. We are actually doing something a bit non-sane, because we are trying to use this something inside a recursive function. We are using the same thing, okay? And then perhaps the function is not ready, etc. So it warns us, but this is fine.
Okay.
The next 3 lines is the last part of the thing, and then we are actually, you can see, whenever the test area, whenever you key up, we are actually going to, you see that dispatcher we are getting at, and we are going to send the dispatch text updated message. And with the current text area value. Why there's this 2 bangs? I think it's not required anymore. It's an artifact. But what it does, if you're curious, it just unboxes, casts an object or something like that. I think it's somehow F# compiler got smarter. It's got somewhat a bit old. So this is whenever someone keys up, this is a regular DOM event. We are just dispatching a text updated with the current text area message. Whereas I know this part might be confusing, and don't worry about it. But whenever you first time key press, I also issue a key press for whatever reason. And we need to handle, there's a third action. Whenever someone clicks a reset button, what will it be here? So let me type you for the beginning. Yeah, what will it be? Any ideas?
Again, what you're attempting to do is?
What I'm trying to do is that whenever someone presses the reset button, I'd like to dispatch a start over message. Obviously, because this is what my logic dictates.
So it should be at event listener on click, and then dispatch.
Yes. Careful, it's not on click. It's confusing, I know. It's click. This is not a Fable thing, it's JavaScript thing. On click is a property, attribute, or more correctly. Always get confused this thing. And what will be here?
Oh.
What's the message we are trying to send?
Start over.
Yeah. And
just quickly review like what the interface, I mean, like user interface for this thing is. So it's click. If you click the reset button, then you're then you're starting over. Then for the test area, I guess for these two, so key up is when the key is released, and key press is when it's pressed. So
yes,
we're sending. I guess I'm a little bit confused. Like,
yeah, I know you're right, and perhaps it's a little. So I would suggest for the time being, just ignore this part. Ignore this exists. Okay. I'll explain why this exists. So for the time being, just pretend as if this doesn't exist. It's not that important. And apparently, these ignores aren't required either. Does anyone know why there's a question mark here?
it's like dynamic type. I mean,
Yes.
that's you. Sure.
Yes. Fable implements this by default. Normally, a F# compiler won't. I mean, it will ask you to implement the question mark operator from somewhere. It's not baked into F# compiler, but Fable has done it for you, which is you want to fall back to dynamic typing, which I kind of like it. I used a lot, actually. I'm not very obsessed to everything to be strictly typed. Sometimes it makes life easier. Okay, so there are few places, I think there are two functions we need to implement. Let's look at the view thing. So the view thing, which gets this is a model, but I'm getting a portion of the model by pattern matching, and it gets the dispatcher. And basically says that whenever the state is initial, we are just setting the text areas to this. This is the rendering part. Visual value to empty string, inner HTML to, well, I can use the time as well. It's the same thing, right? Empty string, and then there's a stop timer function. The stop timer function, well, we should see what the start timer function does, then we'll talk about it. Which is,
can you please just explain line 35? What is this? Pattern matching within the function declaration, or?
Yeah, so this is supported by F#. You can do this. I mean, well, for example, whenever you're passing a parameter, this is what we call. Let me just show you. Whenever we pass the new model, right here, and new model is actually the type is typing model. This thing is still typing model. However, we are not interested other portions of it. We are only interested some portions of it. So you can do this. It's a valid F# code. It's not. It has nothing to do with Fable. F# supports this kind of syntax.
So you accept the parameter, you deconstruct it, and then you've taken just 2 out of, let's say, 5 components if you're interested in.
Yes, that's true. And similar thing exists in TypeScript as well. So you can do this kind of trick. But if it is too confusing, you can also do, well, model, typing model, alternatively. And then you need to do this. Same thing, no difference. I'm not sure. Maybe this is more verbose, so I'm not sure what's clear. So we're going to talk about stop timer, but let's just talk about this just started. So just started is about when you first do a keep up, when we first type our first letter. So what we want is to start the timer, start a timer. So for that, well, I'm not going to expect you to know about, but I define my own convention. And I'll explain. And you can do it alternatively. This is not the only way. Or perhaps my way isn't perhaps the most ideal way either. So the code I coded for this kind of logic is this. I checked, probably this is not required either. Well, in the window, I will define an arbitrary, my interval kind of thing, arbitrary property. And if it is null, that means that there is no timer defined so far. I'll just use that window that start interval. And this thing will do, this is baked into Fable. It's baked into Fable and browser as well. It's a set interval function. It will tell that, well, for every 10 milliseconds, execute this thing. And it will post a tick message to our dispatcher. This is just redundant, right? For this case. Okay. And this gives you a set interval thing. Something you can, it's like a handle to your timer. This is standard JavaScript. This exists in the browser API. And Fable just has an interface of it. And I admit, it's not very ideal, right? Every 10 milliseconds you do this, it's actually, it's not accurate in terms of timer. So because things will accumulate, but let's just pretend as if it's accurate. Making an accurate timer is a different story. Once I get my timer, I'll just set it to this interval. And it's my convention. I mean, you can do it in another way. And this is all. Once we do that, we can now look at what stop timer does. And stop timer, what it does, it actually finds out this clear interval, my interval, and it just clears it, which means stops the timer. And then also, in order not to leak it or just clean it up, we are just setting it null. Any questions for this timer thing? Is it clear? Shall I repeat? Yeah. So basically, we are just using an arbitrary property, a global variable, and we're just dispatching tick messages every 10 milliseconds. What is correct? We are just setting the border to some color. And if it is wrong, well, I'll just type this for you. We're going to set it to another color, some color. Well, this should be stop the timer. What shall we hear?
You know why it is? Sorry, I have a quick question about style on test wrapper. Given that style is an attribute on all HTML elements and test wrapper is an HTML element, I think. Well, we just
It's an excellent question, and I have the same question, and I don't know the answer. You're right, but I also told the same thing. So, and if you do that, it will complain. I presume, maybe this isn't a well-defined object, so it's a very raw object. So perhaps that's why they didn't decide to type it. My guess, because if you want to give it a concrete type or a style, perhaps you can define it as obj, right? But it is ignored. This is how it is. But I have the same question as you.
Isn't style always a string, though?
Oh no.
No.
The style is an object with a lot of properties, like this one.
Oh,
Then,
I see.
Yeah, the other one, these ones are filled by strings. So that's probably my guess. That's why they didn't. No problem. I don't particularly worry about these things. I think duck typing is just fine. And what will it be here? So we need to stop the timer once things complete. What will it be? Well, it's stop timer. Call the stop timer function. Remember, we have defined it here. That's it. And then finally, the very final function, which we're going to figure on one exercise, we are going to display the time. And we pass the time to weave time function. And what this thing does is, well, if the minutes or if a portion of the seconds is less than 10, then we want to make it as a 09 or 08, not 8 or 9, right? So it's just a visual convenience. And it says that if the section is less than 9, you would like to prepend a 0 to the section. What will it be? Zero plus section. Oh, and string. Okay. So this just adds a leading 0, given if the section is less than 9. And once you do that, the leading 0 just, I don't know, it's a bit verbose. Could do it with a smarter way than I did. You get the current time, and then we just inject it into the timer in your HTML. And that's all. Our application is fully completed right now. Let's just see and run it. So in order to run this, well, I think this is the default port, so you might want to configure it. This is for hot module reloading, by the way. There are 2 different ports for Vite. One is hot module reloading, and the other one is just a server port. So for the timing, we're going to use the Vite's own server. For real applications, you will want to host this thing from ASP.NET. And this part says that don't watch any F-sharp file. We don't just in case, because why? Okay, so you can consult to the Vite's documentation, but that's all about it. How we are going to run is we have a start and a build. Build is for production. If you want to get a bundle, you can, let's look at the start. So there's a reason which I'm going to skip. I echo some message. It's for ASP.NET integration, which we don't have it right now. But then what it does is it executes the following command: .NET Fable watch dot in the current folder. It says that Fable should build the current folder with source maps available and extracted to build output folder. Okay. Then I would like to also run Vite as well. So there's some run fast. So I'll just do it my existing build folder. You don't have to do this, just in case something is cached. Once this thing comes out, let's just run. It will actually create a build folder here, and our HTML file. You can see that there's a script here. It will grab that from the build folder, and the output file will be up.js. So in order to run this inside the client folder, I just do npm run start and pray. So for whatever reason, I see these errors. I'm not sure, some coming from Vita, I suppose, but it doesn't incur a problem usually. Sometimes I had to start Vita 2 times for whatever reason. When Vita says that, I'm also listening from this port. Let's see if it works. And you see there's an error, but yeah. So once this happens, you need to, I don't know why. Let's try a second time. Okay. And let's try. Okay, we have an issue. So everything works, but the timer didn't kick in. I think I missed something. Let's see. Press key up. Start it. Okay. I don't know, this should have worked. Let's just try to debug it. Whatever it is, it's a simple thing, I suppose. And this will be also a good demonstration, perhaps, to debug it. My turbo. Maybe I made a typo somewhere. It came here. And we can go to not here, the build part, the model, sorry, the core part. Well, not the JS part, sorry, the deployed part. Okay, it comes here. Are we not printing it properly? So once this is done, well, it is there. Oh, it's okay. Somehow it worked, but when I slowed it down, okay, it's very strange. That's okay, no problem. There's already a done branch. I don't know where did I make a mistake, so we can switch to that. Yeah, and also we have demonstrated how debugging works. So we can perhaps check out the dump branch. I don't know where did I make a mistake, right? Let me just copy this thing just a second. I just can get it from the okay. I somehow fixed it. Run again. Somewhere I made a mistake and I just copied it from the original solution. Wow, what happened? Reloaded I did. Okay. Yeah. Apparently I didn't know. Alberto's point is a good point. You can just use two string 00. My primary concern probably I was just curious about the Fable, if Fable supports it. So there's a bug you can see when I start over, the color doesn't get in. So it's something I missed. But if I make a mistake, the color becomes orange. Okay, so this shows that how we can build a real application. Any questions?
Sorry, can you show again really quickly how you got to that debug view of the code live in the browser?
You mean how did I debug?
Yeah, well, you went to dev. I saw you went to dev tools, and then was there anything like
Yes.
configuration around like source maps or anything special you need to do?
Yeah, no, you don't need to do anything. The only thing you need to do, as I demonstrated here, let me just show it to you. In the package JSON, this S, you see that -S? It instructs the Fable to generate source map. So once you look at here, you can see each file has a map file generated. And then once you do that, you don't have to do anything. And you go to sources. And so in my case, I configured it to altered and deployed. Deployed one is the JavaScript, and altered part is the F# code. And that's it. You can just put breakpoints.
Sorry, that configuration around authored and deployed, is that a Chrome thing or?
Yeah, it's a Chrome. But the only thing you have to do is just click this one, and that's it.
Got it, I see.
Yeah. So I think by default it's not selected. So you just select this one, and then it happens. Though this debugger isn't as perfect as .NET debugger, so don't expect miracles from it, but it's good enough.
Do you ever, instead of like debugging the F# code in Chrome, do you ever debug it like within VS Code while it's running in Chrome?
Yes. Yeah, you can do that. I did that, and I can show it to you, but maybe later. The thing is, there isn't much advantage of it. So it already uses browser's debugging engine, so it's the same thing. So
Understood.
Yeah, maybe things like you can add conditional breakpoints, etc. Maybe that might be the advantage. But I can show it to you later. It is doable. Yeah, and simple as well. So this brings us the next part of it. We'll check the time. So we just built this thing with plain Elmish loop, and we haven't talked about web components. And so let me just talk about web components a bit and the lit thing. Just very briefly. A web component is something you may heard. The name is very generic name, but it's a specific browser technology. It's built into all major browsers. Perhaps IE 11 doesn't support, but the other all major browsers support it for like 5-6 years. It's not even new, but it's somewhat. I have never seen a single job ad someone asking for a web component developer. But it is somewhat becoming more and more common. Recently, Microsoft Store, they just moved to web components. Adobe Photoshop, I think they just made their online application based on web components. The web component is something a little more agnostic. And probably the best way to demonstrate before even going to this is let me just show you this progress tag. So you might know, well, there's a progress tag, and then for HTML5, and then it just demonstrates this kind of progress thing. But are you curious what's really going on here? There's a setting in my Chrome or Edge, which I have set it. I can show it to you briefly after I show what's going on here. Let's try to find out this progress thing. So if I look at it, unlike your case, I will be able to go inside of it. And then you can see actually this progress tag is composed of something else. And there's something called a shadow root. And there's also some sort of other divs as well. Essentially, this thing is just actually composed of other divs, and there's a built-in browser styling and etc. that essentially gives this kind of look. And that's what a web component is. Typically, a web component has something called shadow root. And what's shadow root? You can imagine something like a very lightweight of iframe, but it's not really an iframe. It's super, super, super light. And it gives you somewhat a distant isolation, CSS isolation. Obviously, if there were no CSS isolation, if I define my page and define a div and give all these like a blue color, I would by mistake break the browser's progress tag as well. So the essence is the CSS tags or CSS styles can't penetrate inside shadow root, or the CSS styles inside the shadow root can't penetrate outside. That's the essence of it. Another aspect is just it supports something like called a slot, which I'll talk about it. Basically, a web component is something that allows you to define your own custom tags that is natively recognized by the browser. It's much faster, and it's actually, since a platform, you can actually use it with any other technology. You can use it along with React. You can use it along with Angular. You can use it with it's pretty neutral. In my case, I have this kind of simple web component. How would you write a web component from scratch? Let me show it to you. You create a class, a JavaScript class. It's mandatory. And you extend it from a HTML element, which is baked into browser. And then what you do is in the constructor, you call, well, expand this here. You call the base constructor with super. And then optionally, you can, well, most of the time, you can attach a shadow root. Though shadow root is not mandatory web components. It's not mandatory for it. But if you want CSS isolation, that's what you want. And once you have the shadow root, you can inject an arbitrary, in this case, I inject the string. This is plain string into the shadow root. And notice what it does is it actually creates a p tag, a slot tag, and the p tag. What slot does is, so whenever, for example, I put some nested tag, web component will visually render it inside the slot, like a template. This is all baked into browser, no frameworks. It will work for every browser. You don't have to install anything and no JavaScript library required. But that's the essence of web component. There are some stuff, functions, built-in functions connected, like lifetime management. Like React has mounts on mount. The web component has something called connected callback. And well, and also attribute change callback whenever you change an attribute. Once you define a web component, you must register it. You must define it, and you can only define it for once. And when defining, you say that, well, I want to define a custom tag, which is my component here, and I want to associate it with this class. And for your custom components, there must be at least one dash. It's mandatory. Okay. Once you do that, your web component is ready to use. So you can see there are two web components here. I mean, two instances of the same web component here. One is blue and one is red. And the reason is, by default, the web component says anything inside my slot should be red. Okay. And the color is somewhat an inherited attribute, inherited property. So that's why the second case, the hello LPC is red color. Okay. It's coming from this one. However, this is blue. And the reason being is, well, I say that for my all DOM elements that's called with p tag, I want them to be blue. And this one overrides. And then this style, the page style overrides because this is still part of the non-shadow root. Okay. So you need to practice this, but this is the essence of it. It just allows you to create this kind of custom properties, custom tags. And the library we are going to use is Lit, but we are not going to use it directly. So if you go to Lit Dev, it's developed by Google. I can't say I'm much fond of it. It allows you to define via TypeScript. You can define your own web components. In this case, it says that, well, I want to define a web component called simple-greeting, and says that, well, there's a property, and I want to render, when it's rendered, it will render this thing. And if you look at the index.html, the browser will recognize this tag natively. Okay. So what we are going to use, this part with Fable, Elmish. We're going to integrate it. Any questions? Is it confusing a bit? Or the objective? Yeah.
You mentioned before about like, well, obviously you prefer this over React and you're always getting questions about it. Can you just say a few words about, you said before that web components doesn't get in your way, but React does. Can you maybe comment on some of the, what that getting in the way is, and also some of the performance implications and how like, this differs from virtual DOM and a little bit like on those topics?
Well, first of all, this tag is you natively register the browser. So whenever the browser is parsing the DOM tree, it will figure out and find the associated class here. Okay, and it will render it. Obviously, there's a lot less work compared to what React does. Okay, because React has to, well, you have to execute that thing. It's not the browser that's initiating. It's you need to call React.render, and you give the DOM element to render the React tree, right? Here, it's the opposite. It's a browser that initiates. While parsing the DOM tree, it will find out and then it will initiate. And for example, when you delete an element from the DOM tree, by whatever you mean, I mean, by remove element or just using DOM operations, it will clean up automatically. You can attach properties, attributes by using plain JavaScript, even if it is nested. So what I mean by React gets in the way, those, well, typically we use JSX markup, right? Those are not real. They're just sugar. Eventually, all those JSX tags are converted into React.createElement. So actually, what you end up is a gigantic JavaScript, a monolithic JavaScript tree, calling React.createElement and then calling React.createElement. Okay, you can't easily access. You rely on React's lifecycle, mount, unmount. It's confusing. In order to get access to the element, you need to use refs. It's something like one level above. I think it's an opinionated way. I'm not sure to what level I can explain.
No, that was a solid overview. Thank you.
Yeah. For example, you can just create this element with JavaScript and insert anywhere in the page by using plain JavaScript. You can create a copy of it. So I can clone this element just like a div tag, and then you'll have another copy. It is not easy to do so with the React case because it's sugar. So yeah. Having that said, let's switch to the lit branch. We'll find out. Let's check out. Oh, that's an origin size. No, I have moved through this one. So let's check out this one. Oh, that's not important. Why it's like that? I haven't pushed this. Okay. So now from now on, there's not much exercise. I'll just talk. So this is about the other. So how are you going to use lit? How are you going to? So I mentioned about testable MVU. So it will be and hot mode reloading, this kind of stuff. We are going to talk about it. So one of the things I made some changes. The first change is, well, we have now packet back. And so you will want to do .NET tool restore to restore the packet, .NET packet restore, or install restore, let's call it. Bring and build everything else. Okay. Yeah. And if we look at it, now we have another project called MVU, and this is how I design applications. So this thing, I moved our logic to a different library. And this thing even doesn't have any reference to Elmish itself, although it's essentially, it will look like an Elmish thing. Well, I just, for the sake of simplicity, I just copy the model and the core directly. So let's look at the model first. Same thing, no changes. The only change here, you would see there's something called side effect, which is like, it's my own definition. There's no such built-in thing. And the reason is I have some sort of little bit, if you're familiar with Elmish, you probably know about commands, which is how they handle with the effects, side effects. But I don't like them a bit. They're useful, super useful, but I find the syntax very clunky and gets in the way, and they're non-testable. It's hard to test with if you're an update function with a loop. So I came in with a different, it's not my idea, by the way. Someone else came up with this idea, and I just embraced it. And basically, I said that, well, I will have 3 side effects. Well, one is the no effect, so it's just like a command of none. And there are two more side effects. One is the start timer and the stop timer. Okay. So these side effects represent some of the things I want to do with the browser API. It's not relevant to the Elmish loop. And then the core loop is, well, it's the same thing. The only thing is now I have my init function here. And instead of command loop, so as if you're familiar with Elmish, we return command none, I return no effect. And this will essentially make things very testable. As I said, this library doesn't have anything. You can run it on the .NET platform. Doesn't have any reference to Elmish itself. And the rest is the same. I don't have to explain it because it's exactly the same code. So all simple. I suppose there's no question here, right? Let's look at the application part. So let's load it. Let me just close all down. Sometimes syntax highlighting doesn't, yeah, now we have it. So in order to, as I said, I don't use commands, but I use something called, a pattern called side effect. In order to make it happen, I utilize 2 helper functions. Actually, there's 1 helper function is enough. It's something like a make program with order executes, well, maybe side executes, something like that. What it does is it's like a regular Elmish application, which takes init update leave function, but also a 4th function called execute, which executes the side effects. And all it does is whenever you get a side effect, it passes the side effect to your execute function and then runs it as a command of effect. Okay. If it's confusing, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But we'll see it in action. And then once we do is we just wrap the make program, which is the standard Elmish thing. We call init to convert and then update function to convert, and then we just run view. This code is just old code, just comment it out. Stop timer, you're familiar. Start timer, you're familiar. This function didn't exist in the first case, but I just wrapped it. Now we have the interesting part, the execute. The execute is something that takes the order or side effect and then reacts based on that. And if there's no effect, then it will just return an empty string. Sorry, a unit type. When you call start timer, it will issue a start timer. And when you call stop timer, you have to call these functions. So if you're familiar with Elmish, I always struggle personally with this command that async that, well, there's attempt either perform start. It's super confusing. So you don't have to worry about all of these. So if you need, for example, if you have to, let's say, talk to server side, something like that, you just call your async, right? And then do whatever you want here, and then start your async with async start immediate. And this will work. So you never ever have to worry about the commands ever again. Okay. because this returns a unit. And I think start immediate is the only, I think, one of the few things that's supported on the Fable side. So you can't just do start as task on the other things that they're not supported in Fable. This part is same. We'll come to view. Let's collapse that. Now this part is actually somewhat very standard Elmish thing. But I just used, instead of make program, I just used make program with order execute. And the reason is that instead of init, update, and view functions, it will take also the fourth thing, which is called an execute. And this is, I assume you're familiar with it. Every Elmish program needs the init, which is called for once. The update is called for each update thing, and the view is just the rendering part, and the execute is the side effect part. Then if you use React, use things like program start, React with React, etc. Here we use something called with lit on element, and then you give that to to wherever you want to render. I'd like to highlight there's an important thing. There are two different ways of using lit. This is more the conventional way, and this doesn't create a web component, actually. It actually allows you to work with the DOM tree in a lit way, but not really creating a web component. You're not seeing any web component here. I'll explain the other case. This one is just for debugging purposes. It will just run pretty standard Elmish thing. Because I have this Elmish HMR, no? Yeah. By default, the program that run will also support, you need to use this hot module reloading as well, which we will see in action. So for the view itself is somewhat similar to what you see. There is also, in order to use hooks, so you can use hooks like similar to what you know in React. There's a set of hooks. You need to decorate your use effect one on change, etc. In order to use hooks, you need to decorate your function with the hook component attribute. This is a decorator. And also, I created a hot module reloading token. I think for this case, it's unnecessary for this mode of lit, because this one does that automatically for you. But anyway, I kept it. Now, this part is lit syntax. You can look at the documentation, Fable.Lit. It talks about this thing. So there's some sort of documentation talking about how you're going to use it. So unlike React, you'll see this somewhat looks like a string, which is something I appreciate, actually. So I know a lot of Fable community like things like Fable.Lit, which gives you a type safe of constructing your React components. But I worked professionally in a company where we use this thing. And when you have an external designer, it doesn't work well, because your designer comes up giving you HTML, and you start to have problems porting the HTML to Fable.Lit or whatever this framework. I think there's a tool that converts HTML to that, but it's not very maintainable. Yes, there's a VS Code plugin, so which is what I use here. Let me show you that. Something called, well, it's already installed. I can find the name. Yeah, highlight templates in F#. Yeah. So last time I used that in the draft part. Remember? So that just what it does is if you decorate an arbitrary function like HTML, it will just syntax highlight it, right? And that's just perfect. In this case, in the draft case, the HTML function was just an identity function. However, this one is special. it's coming from the Fable.Lit. It's not an identity function anymore. And although this thing looks like a string, eventually what it generates isn't a string. This is slightly an ugly part of Fable.Lit or Lit itself. It's actually something called template result. And Alfonso, creator of Fable, argues that he prefers, I think, Fable.Solid, because it just generates true strings. But I can live with that. So it just, in general, it works great. And what it does is, if you remember in our earlier case, we have this index.html file. I just removed all this portion and I copied it here. Okay. And I can use this handlebars, curly braces, whatever you call, to inject custom code here, just like string concatenation, string interpolation, more likely. So this class actually checks that, well, if my current status is correct, then it will use this correct style. If it is wrong, wrong. If it is complete, and complete. And these styles are defined here. So remember how we set the colors last time? And now the colors are just coming like that. Okay. And you can see we defined key up. In regular HTML, you would use on key up. But when you're using lit syntax, you need to use at key up. So for all events, you need to use at syntax. And this is standard Fable. Don't ask me why. You need to define something called EV, and then define your dispatcher, just like that. Similarly, at key press, similarly. There's something called, so dot value is essentially setting the value not via attribute. So if you do this, it will set the value as an attribute. If you do this, it will set the value as a JavaScript call. I'm not sure if this matters for this case, but I think the reason is text area doesn't have a value attribute, but it has a property on the DOM API. So that's how we set the current text. Okay. And similarly, we inject the time here like that. And similarly, our reset function is just this one. So once we do that, if we look at the recap, we haven't changed anything. Our core logic is here in a separate place. It's testable. And we created our Fable.Lit thing, and we use these templates, and then we have side effects, etc. And essentially, it's the same thing. Now, let's see. Let's try to run. Let's go to CRC client folder again. I'll just delete the build again. Yeah, this all looks good. Yeah, I think we can try. npm run start. Again, this funny error is coming up. Not sure why. Okay. This is just overriding. Yeah, now it's there. Watching. Okay. What I forgot is run npmi. It complains that lit wasn't there because you also have to, well, it's not a dev dependency. This is a mistake. It should be on the regular dependencies, but by mistake, I put it here, but doesn't matter. So this is the lit framework. You need to bring it back. Click install. Okay. Let's try once more. Okay. And it's the same thing. Let's look at from a DOM perspective. So we said that we are going to inject this thing here. You can see our DOM elements are just rendered directly here. So that's how you use Elmish with Lit. I think it's easy, but we haven't even reused the real web component thing yet. That's really the next thing. We can see how hot module reloading does work. Start over. So once you type something, let's change this text. Say this. Sorry, this part is changed. Yeah, see. Now the timer has stopped. And so some sort of side effect, because what we do here is now it's still dispatching, but it's dispatching it to a different Elmish loop. So that dispatch is not our own. You need to be careful with this kind of side effects with hot module reloading. Yeah. So how we are going to execute, there's a question about how we are executing side effects in this model. Let's just recap that part. What we did first, typically in our model, in addition to our model update and init function, I define an arbitrary discriminated union called side effect. Okay, and this is just as my own definition. Then I define this helper function. What it does is it actually accepts a fourth execute parameter, and then whenever your model returns something, then it would pass the state to your execute function along with the command effect. What command effect does is actually it will give you a dispatcher. So notice my start timer and stop timer. Well, stop timer has a dispatch, and where does the dispatch come from? Is this execute order. So execute has this order or the side effect. We can call it side effect maybe. Same thing. And a dispatch function. And once we match the order, we just based on discriminated union, we pass to the we call the correct function, and this must return a void. So we don't have to worry about any other command stuff. And what we do is instead of the regular make program, this is standard make program. We just use the make program with order execute, and then we pass our execute function. So that's the combination you need to follow if you like this pattern. Yeah, that's now the next thing will be there are two parts, and we'll briefly conclude. We're going to talk about the web component, and we're going to talk about the how to integrate React, and yeah, maybe Redux dev tools, etc. So let's do that. Let's delete the build folder again, and then git restore dot. Let's clean up, git checkout. Okay, and let's .NET packet restore build. By the way, this version runs in .NET 8, just in case you're curious. And npmi. Let's install the dependencies. So what's changed? There's no change here in the library. The app did not change with the very exception of this part. I remember I was using a regular program kind of thing, but now I'm using a different thing called lit element. So I told you there are two different ways of using lit. One is the earlier case, and this one is just creating a true web component called Fable typing. And you create an arbitrary function called lit element, and you follow the syntax. Well, I need to close this thing and reopen. Apparently, I don't have the syntax highlighting yet. This is something I don't like about Ionide. It's a bit clunky. Reload. Okay. And how do we use this? If you look at our HTML file, this time, previously this was empty. There were only comments here. Now this time I have added this web component because it will be registered. Okay. So it will be a native web component that is recognized by the browser. And what we do is now this time this token makes a difference, and you use this lit element. You must do this, and this gives you the host. The host is the parent element, so it's a reference to this element. The Fable timing DOM element. It's a reference to that element. Sometimes you might use it, you might not. The prop is used if, let's say, you have maybe some attributes defined here, like regular HTML, data foo equals bar kind of thing. So it allows you to access this kind of props here. Okay. And there's one interesting bit is that do you want to use a shadow DOM or not? So if you use shadow DOM, you will have a pure complete CSS isolation. In this case, I opted for the simpler case. I said I don't want to go with the shadow DOM, but if you want it, then you just set this to true. So we can see the difference once it runs. Now, there's another difference here. I defined two functions here, this one and this one. In the earlier case, I have used this version, but this variant of Fable.Lit, the program will not ask you to pass the view function. It only asks you to init and update. Okay. And this is defined by this. This is baked into Fable.Lit framework. There's something called make hidden. And you can see the signature. It just asks for init and update. It doesn't ask for the view. What it does is it gives you a dispatcher. Sorry, once you get the program, you pass to this use hook, use Elmish hook, and then you get the model and the dispatcher, and then you manually call your view. So that's how this works, the alternative way. And this part is the same, no changes here. Yeah, so let's see. I think for the sake of demonstration, I've changed the ports here. It became 5183. And if you look at the package.json file here, yeah, still the same. Well, okay. So let's run. npm run start. If you want a production build, you just run this build one, and then it will put this JavaScript into here. So you can just run it as a bundled version of it. Did it complete? No, yeah, now it's there. So I changed the port number. Okay, and it still works. So this time, when I look at it now, you will see something different. You can see the Fable typing here. So it became a web component. And you can just manipulate them as just like a regular DOM element. So that's why I said I prefer this to over React. You can create child web components, and they also become a regular DOM elements. You can put them everywhere you want. So you can have that kind of composition instead of having a gigantic React tree. And I find it very, very powerful and flexible. So this is how it works. And yeah, and hot module reloading again works. Let's just see that. Can go here. So we can put the G here. You can see even this is powerful. It even didn't break the timer. So compared to the other alternative. Okay. What happens if we make the shadow route happen? So let's just see. I haven't tried this, but I expect the entire CSS will break. It will break. You see, once I made a shadow route, the application is still functional, I believe. But what? Yeah, now our article section, etc., they became part of the shadow root, and now the CSS can't penetrate inside, but it still works. So that's the difference between, maybe you want to, you can bring your own style sheet into here. Now this has become a true web component. Now the interesting bit is, we can let's go to elements here. We can maybe clone this, duplicate element, ta-da, and you now have two different distinct. Oh, this one doesn't work. Because the timers are, you're using the global timer, right? That's why they overlap. But you can see this is something, it's a very powerful approach. Cool. Any questions?
So in this case, we don't have too much going on. So, we've just got the one style.css. Is there, with using this model of things, is there a recommended way of handling CSS, like using something like Tailwind? Or, I mean, obviously this doesn't lend itself quite in the same way to like other CSS and JS frameworks like styled components, which obviously is very much baked into.
You need to use the platform. Let me put it another way. First of all, you can bring your own style sheet into here, and I can show it to you. Maybe there's a live example. I have some sort of side project. Maybe you have heard it. I try to make a lot of noise over here. So this is a 3D bin packer, and this somehow uses an approach called, there's something called declarative shadow DOM. And this is also a baked-in browser technology that's supported by Safari and Chrome. I think the Firefox support is somewhat polyfilled. And what it does is, so these are actually web components, and they're behind the shadow root. You can see there's an input form here, and you can see this. There's some sort of master style sheet I would like to share between the page and inside. So I can put that style sheet by linking into that. So that's one of the ways. And this also achieves this declarative shadow root. So if I look at the source code of this page, you can see the web component is there. So it's actually server-side rendered. And this technology, and there's the difference is that you need to decorate something called template shadow root mode. And once the browser sees this, automatically it will create a shadow root for these parts. So far, is when the server-side rendering was on the monopoly of Node guys. I'm not sure how you can do server-side rendering with React once your backend is .NET. I don't know anyway. By using this way, you can do server-side rendering, which is a different story if you want it or not. But the search engines and other things you can see, they can see their HTML directly, as well as your page comes up rendered initially. So this is one of the ways I tackle. I just inject my style directly from the server-side rendering into the thing. But you need to read up. I would suggest there's something called constructible style sheets kind of thing. You need to see that these APIs are baked into the browser. I hope it was, but you can use Tailwind or something like that. Web components are completely technology agnostic. You can use your React, everything still works. And as I said, the shadow root is optional.
Got it, understood.
Yeah, we're a little bit over time. Let me quickly go through a couple of examples. We'll finish in 5 minutes. My keyboard just blended to touch. Okay. Suppose we're in clean state. No? Why? Oh, Git restore, not that. Okay. Yeah, so let's move on to the next branch. I'll share the repo link so you can. We talked about this one. We talked about React integration. and then Redux Dev Tools. So we'll just talk two more branches, but very quickly. I'll just talk about them. Let's check out the git check out React. So you can use Feliz or regular React with this technology. Let me just install. I don't have an example for Feliz right now, but it works as well. I can show it later maybe, but I'll show the React case. Let's packet restore. npmi. I think we have now new stuff here. So if you look at the changes, so we have an about TSX file. This is the React TypeScript file. And what it does is it just renders 2 cubes. So there's a framework called React 3 Fiber. It's a very interesting project. If you're not sure, if you haven't heard it, I recommend you to check it out. It allows you to use 3D programming kind of thing. There's no example here. There are a lot of games here, actually, very super sophisticated. You can see turns a cube. Anyway, we'll see. And I guess I need to reload this thing again. There's a helper library. This is coming from Fable.Lit repository, but it was a bit unmaintained. I just upgraded to React 18. And actually, all it does is it somehow renders the React inside somewhere inside a web component, kind of inside a div. And that's actually how we interact between React and Lit. So in this case, it just renders a React component inside Lit. You can study the source code later, but I'll just show you how we are using it. So I opened Feliz. Actually, there's no Feliz here, I guess. But so notice this is one of the ways. It's a very nice way you can import a TSX file. Let's say you have written some code with React, and you import from this file. You import this thing from this file, and I pass a title here, and you just call it React import it. And if you look at this thing, you can see there's a props here, which is defined as title string. Well, I'm not using the title anyway, but it will be part of the props. And what I do is something very simple. Is if I go back to my code, if I can. Once I get this about, I use my helper function, React to Lit. So this somehow converts my React component into a Lit component. And this is just my component. I need to pass the title. I think I haven't. I'll just do it. And once I have the component, I can just use it inside my Lit template, just like that. So I can pass the title here, and that's it. If you run it, you can run, start. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Similarly, you can use Feliz code as well, not just the TSX form. It is possible to do it. So revisit our code here. Let's just reload here. Maybe beat didn't kick in. Let me just try again. Sometimes you need to do it 2 times. I don't know why. I just have to actually, okay. Yeah, that's also, well, you can use a web component is like a div tag. So however you use a div tag, you can use your web component inside React. So it's the same thing. So you can see our 2 cubes here, you see? So these are coming from React, and we still have our code function running. I mean, the question is, There are two ways actually. How would I use lit inside React? As I said, one way is just you can just think of your web component just like a regular div element, custom element, and that's going to work. The alternative way is that this helper has also another function called Fable.Lit, which I haven't tried this actually, but this thing just creates a React element out of a lit element, so you can just use it two ways. Okay, the last part I'm going to show you Redux DevTools, and then we'll finish. That will take one last minute. Hopefully this is the last time. Branch. So the changes now this time. Okay, I need to install the packet restore. There it is with debugger. Now the questions I haven't answered, for example, I haven't shown you how would you compose multiple lit components. But as I said, it's like reusing another div element. So, or you can follow the same monolithic Elmish pattern if you're familiar with that. Yeah, and yeah, I think all good. So let's just run it directly. Client, camera on start. Okay. I guess it still hooks up. Okay. Yeah, so the thing I wanted to show you is that, for example, we can actually, this time I have what's package JSON file. I have the remote dev package, which is the Redux DevTools. If you have this extension, so I'll just open it. You can see actually it shows you the Redux messages, just like in React case as well. The thing is, in Fable.Lit mode 1, which I showed you, when you move this backwards, you will see the past states. But in this mode, you won't see that. So don't be surprised why you don't see this thing. So this is one of the things. Second thing is in the console, you can also see all the messages and states going through. It is due to this one. These two lines. One is the console trace and the video debugger. That concludes everything. Thank you for listening. I highly recommend you to check out Fable.Lit. It's super powerful. It's my default go-to way to develop any application, web application. I'll just post the repository link into the chat and also to the screen for anyone watching. Fable typing test. So you can see the branches and everything I did is there. If you have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, feel free to leave.
Great. I do have a couple of questions, mostly around like handling passing state between components. So, you know, in React, there's so many tools for this kind of thing. Obviously, I mean, Elmish more or less is the way of handling state, but what about passing state between, you know, from parent to child or back the other way? Is there any?
Good question. So there are multiple ways. First of all, you can employ the, if you're familiar with regular monolithic Elmish loop, you can still employ the same technique. That means you can create your own view functions, sub-v functions, just like regular functions, and you can call them. So the monolithic Elmish loop, I'm assuming you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
It still works. You're still there. But suppose that you have a different distinct web component, then you can't do that because they have their own different Elmish loops. So in that case, you can, for example, one of the ways is I'll show you a real life example as well. You can create your own child component here, my child component here, okay, and then you can just use a DOM level attribute. My prop is equal to true. You can do this kind of thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, this part is actually, if you see the documentation of Fable.Lit, it actually allows you to read this kind of thing. So this is another way to pass a state from parent to child. So notice this is the DOM attribute. So the thing you can put here is a string. Okay, it can't be a complex object, but it can be. So if in the documentation, it discusses these things. Well, let me find this for you. You can see only property. So you can here it passes a complex object, an F-sharp object. If you use the dot here, then you can pass a state just like you pass like prop drilling in React case, right? And then this is how you read it. This is another way. But this is not the important thing. This is a regular DOM element, so you have full control over it. Another way, I have my earlier workshop, which I'll show you how it works. For example, Fun Pizza Shop. So for example, here, when I click something, a pop-up occurs, which is relevant to whatever I chose, right? And these are different web components. And if I just even order here, then you see that this is a different web component. How the communication now occurs is, if you look at here, this is my design. I created a parent web component for entire menu, and then each item is a different web component. And whenever I click one of these, they dispatch a custom event called pizza selected, and the parent event listens to that. And when you pass a custom event, dispatch a custom event, you can pass complex objects, and then the parent, or this one, for example, is listening on the document level. Listens whenever you click this order button. It lists this thing is dispatches a custom event. It's existing browser support this thing. You can dispatch custom events, not like on click, but your own. For example, something is ordered, and you can listen to those events. And that's another technique I used. So as a summary, you can use the regular monolithic Elmish loop. You can use prop passing, or you can use prop passing, or you can use this kind of event publishing. There's another way. You can create a global store for sharing state between different components. It's something like similar to React context very roughly. But there's a fourth technique.
Got it. And is there an equivalent of like context providers from React, or not really? Like you have to just make sure everything's hooked up to where it can.
There is. It's like there's something even powerful more than that. I particularly don't enjoy React context because it's, well, it's a bit clunky in the sense of, first, they need to be statically defined, and sometimes changing thing causes a re-render in the other places. Let me show you how this works very briefly. And actually, there's even, just before moving into that. So whenever you sign in, for example, it even, anyway, let's just show the code. Client side, something called, I can find the file, login store. Yeah. Well, I should show you the MVU part. So this is like a, this is called something called Fable Store. So this is the Fable Store project or library or something like that, Fable Store. Sharp, I'm not sure if I can. You see? So this one is something like an agnostic context kind of thing. So it talks about why you have a store, etc., etc., and you can use it in different various frameworks. And what you do is you create your own Elmish loop, as in here. Where is it? There's the model, there's the message. Well, this is the FSI file. Just find the real file. Store. There's the message, there's the side effects, there's the init function, there's the update function, but there's no view. Because this is not, this Elmish loop is not meant to create, is not meant to create a view. It's for more like a React context akin. Okay. So you start this by, let's go to the client side. Now store. You start this by program make store, which is my own variant. You init update. You see, there's no view here. You just call it dispose and execute, and you get a store here, and you get a dispatcher. The dispatcher is if you want to notify the store for something like if you want to update the React context, as in you can use this thing. Store is allow you to subscribe to the changes, and yes, it is somewhat. I'm not sure which is inspired from where. Maybe just if I can find subscribe. Wait, I made a typo. Subscribe. Maybe I can find manually. Wait. So maybe user login, sign in. Yeah, for example, I needed whenever the user signed in or signed out, I need my web components to be aware of it. This is the exact same scenario where you would need your React context, right? Maintaining if user sign in or sign out. And in this case, it's just, for example, when the user signs in, it actually, by using this dispatcher, you just tell that the user is logged in. And somewhere else, then you can subscribe, maybe in the checkout. Because when I'm on checkout, I would like to know if the user is just subscribed, sorry, logged in. And yeah, you can see I get the store, it's a global object, and I subscribe it. And whenever store state changes, as well as the initial state, I get a callback. And once I get this new login status, I just dispatch it to my own MVU. So that's how different MVUs in the page or Elmish loops coordinate by using a store. So that's a way of sharing the state.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. And
also,
how does that play with the React, those dev tools?
You mean Redux dev tools or React dev tools?
Sorry, Redux dev tools.
So in Redux dev tools, as you see, we can have multiple web components, and each of which they can have the different Elmish loops. So what happens is, and Elmish store is also one Elmish loop. And what happens is actually, once you have multiple Elmish loops, if I find my project, so if you open this thing, you will see this Dropbox. And then you will see for each of your Elmish loops, it will actually auto-select the latest one, or you can just manually select whichever you want. So you will be able to see them, all of them.
Got it.
Cool. But unfortunately, it doesn't allow you to give a custom name. I created a PR, but it didn't land in another different story. Yeah, well, it's very powerful. I mean, so this actually achieves everything I want. I have server-side rendering, very fast, isolated page components. It's a little bit unusual. I know not common industry standard, but this is my preferred way of developing any kind of web application to this day. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, thank you for listening me. I will publish the recording to YouTube. This was a lengthy video. I enjoyed this time. Yeah. I hope it was useful for you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.